Hello and welcome to the Reach Out for Mental Health podcast. I'm one half of your presenting Stu. I'm Stu Whiffin. Joining me always, Kirsty Eaton. How are you?
I'm really good. This is our first pod in 2 months.
2 months?
2 months. I've missed you.
You've been on holiday.
Well, it's Wrexham doesn't really count though, does it? See, I've been to Wales, Rich. I should be sounding Welsh.
Look at
Sorry.
that. You already bringing a guest in before we've unbelievable behaviour. How was Wrexham anyway?
Do you know what? It was wet.
Yeah.
It was wet. But no, the people of Wrexham are lovely and welcoming, and we had an amazing Welsh Halloween. So that was good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm going to introduce him correctly,
Sorry.
and this Rich Leigh. Hello, lovely to have you with us today. Um, I met Rich through I guess initially a magazine that I worked for, and then we got chatting, and then we met up in London for an event that Rich was part of the team that put it together. And because Rich owns a big PR agency, and so we got chatting, and then Rich come on another one of my podcasts and was discussing PR stunts, and we got chatting, and over some of the conversations, Rich was sort of mentioned some things that I think a hell of a lot of people in their day-to-day life don't experience, and unfortunately many do as well. And so as these conversations started to unfold, I thought, look, I'm going to speak to Rich and see if he's up for coming on this podcast and sort of showing a bit of the vulnerability he shared on some of the conversations we've had with the listeners of this podcast, and hopefully they can learn and understand and maybe relate to some of the experiences that Rich has had to deal with throughout his life. Thanks ever so much for coming on, mate. I
Well,
really,
thank you.
really appreciate it. Before we get into sort of, I guess the sort of your life and your journey, we always start the podcast by saying, if I say the words to you, mental health, what do you think of?
I think of complexity. I think of yeah. That's no good answer, is it? Complexity, but it is. It means something different to everybody. I think I'm concerned because my approach to mental health isn't necessarily always the most. And I said this to you, Stu, that would be my concern. It
Yeah.
isn't necessarily the most well received kind of approach to mental health, and it is of course a lived experience. Yes, you've touched on that, but also I think it's complex because there are so many factors at play. We've spoken to on my pod, we spoke to Mike McCarthy, who I know you guys have spoken to or know as well. Mike McCarthy from the Baton of Hope, and we spoke about resilience and obviously suicide and things like that. And you really get into darker places. But then I do worry that we, as a society, almost embrace it on an individual and societal level in a way that prevents us from learning resilience. And I think that's the thing that people don't love. I'm not here like David Goggins shouting, telling you to stare at yourself in a mirror and, who are you, you're fat, sort yourself out. That's, I'm not coming at this from this, macho, aggressive approach. I'm coming at it from almost what I believe to be a really empathetic approach, which is from a very young age, the mantra I constantly tell myself was somebody's got it worse. Somebody's got it worse. And I think that we are losing sight of, on a macro level, we're losing sight of that fact and becoming quite solipsistic and quite, dare I say, self-centered in our approach to mental health. And I know that there'll be people listening that think, you prick. But I definitely, I feel like if we could take a step back and be a bit, yes, kinder to ourselves, but also more understanding of other people's kind of what other people have to go through too, then we might be able to stop feeling like, oh God, woe is me. And I'm a big progress. You said, I run a business. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Not that I love the word, but that's I guess what I am. I'm progress. I picked myself up and out of a situation. I recognized so young, I need to break this cycle, because people from where I guess my background rarely do break that cycle. And that's evident in my family. I look at them now and I love them dearly, but they can't get out of their own way. And
I love that expression.
Complex. I think my approach to mental health is one of course, put your arm around people, but also know when to give them that little nudge in a positive direction too. I don't know if that's useful.
I'm interested on your take on that, Kirst.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you've said in regards to, people can be quite insular and quite kind of self-concerning, I suppose. And I think it can be helpful to consider what other people are going through, and, to have a certain sense of, there's going to be someone out there that's got it worse than me. But I think it's really important to have a balance, because if you think more one way than the other, I think that can be quite damaging. We have so many people contact us through the support that we offer, whether it be counselling or befriending. And they'll share the most awful stories, and then Karen will kind of discuss the process of how to get them support. And we never cease to be amazed at how many people will turn around and say, but if someone else comes along and they need it more than me, just give them my slot. It's not a problem. There's going to be someone out there that's going to need it more than me. And everything's relative. Everything's relative. You can have someone who on the surface has got everything, has had a really great childhood, their prospects are really quite good, but for some reason something's not quite working out for them. And I think that's just as valid as someone who's just had shit all of their life at the same time, but that's just my view. What the hell do I know?
That's the same as me, Lucas. I don't know anything. What do I know? But all I can do is, from my perspective, just take a step back and go, okay, how and where am I different? And to my family, and I know, without getting too into the weeds, most of them are still alive. And I made a very crass joke at that point when I said something similar to Stu, because there has been suicide in the family. There has been kind of darker times in that sense. But the fact is, I'm like, okay, well, I know that I'm not where I started. And again, my podcast is called The Starting Line. It's all about where we started from, and that everybody has these different starting lines. Some people start 50 yards ahead, and they're going to win that race much easier than you do, or much easier than you can. So, it's recognizing everybody's got a different starting line, but mine, I'm so far, thankfully, from where I started. And that's not the case for lots of people that do have. And again, it's all relative. You listen to a Yeonmi Park, the North Korean defector, and you listen to her every day, and walking past dying children on the street. That's a cry from, like what I considered to be, at the time, I didn't even realize it was quite as bad possibly as on reflection it was. But even still, 8, 9 years old, I thought, people have it worse than this. I can get up and out. I genuinely didn't have a childhood as a result of it. Like that's how I perceive it, because all I could consider was, what can I do to change this situation for myself? And the situation, just to touch briefly on it, was one of domestic violence, was one of a lot of drugs. My uncle, bless him, was a heroin addict, and it come to kind of you never knew if you were getting kind of fat Wayne, where he'd been off and he was happy and he was soft and he was eating chocolate and he wasn't on the drugs, or 2 months later you might get this emaciated, bless him, and he did die of he took his own life, and then like my parents, as I say, it wasn't a good situation. My dad then later was in and out of prison, and my older brother too, and Wayne was too. Wayne was one of those people. So that's my uncle, who he obviously, addicts are like, they need to feed their fix. So he once told me a story of how he went into Curry's or Dixon's or whatever it was at the time, and walked out with the TV as confidently as he could, just basically walked in and walked out with the TV, because nobody questions the man that looks like they're doing something on purpose.
Absolutely. That's the way you get away with anything. That's the way I get away with most things.
And and then he'd tell me a story like that. We were quite close, and then the next night he'd jump out the first story window to go and score, hurting himself along the way, and but my memories of him are that he was just. I think we look at addicts and we think that they're all one way. You walk through streets. I mean, I'm in Gloucester now, Gloucester city centre. It's bad. It's bad for street drinking and street drugs. But that's not the sum of that person. That's not the sum of those people. No. They need help. So my perspective of mental health is that each person individually, of course, they deserve support. But I do worry now that on a macro level, we put our arms around people that aren't quite as I know what you're saying. It is all relative, but I just wish that we could get to a point where anxiety isn't something that every single person says that they feel. Where I don't buy. Again, this is super unpopular, but I don't buy imposter syndrome on the macro level. It's used, because I think it's not okay. It's not cool for me to say, oh, I don't really feel that, because I feel like if I'm in that room, I deserve to be in that room because I've worked so fucking hard to get into that room. That's my perspective. And yes, I'm a straight white male in his 30s. Well done me. But that certainly didn't feel like privilege when I was getting smacked about, or when we were sat because the electric's off, or when I can't go to school because my mum's unable to physically get us there, or various other things. Christ, it's yes. Sorry, I'm.
Can I ask? How was you making, not being able to go to school because your mum couldn't get you there, and experiencing and trying to, I guess, understand why your uncle's moods were fluctuating, when he was, taking heroin and when he wasn't, etc. How was a young boy processing this, and what looking outwards? What was you seeing, and what was actually sort of making sense to you? And was you having conversations at school and realizing, hang on, my friends aren't having this, and how was that sort of shaping you?
No, I knew that it wasn't okay. I knew that, because my dad drank a lot and did drugs as well. I mean, my older brother, bless him, I shouldn't tell his story too much for him, but I went down a sporting path, and that was for poor kids. Sports is up and out. That's you're some lad from Toxteth and you're half decent with the football. That's your way out. For me, it was rugby. That's that's all I could see, and all I could think of was that. So my brother went the music route with my old man, who was quite into his drugs, as I say, and drinking, and he took my brother at a very young age down that path. Immediately, it's not okay. So and again, it's violent. You're scared. You hear the car door shut or the van door shut, and you think, shit. So my perspective was that I wasn't allowed to talk about it because it would impact on us worse. And that was true. I mean, I remember somebody once came knocking on the door, a lady from school, this was primary school, just to check in on my mum, which nobody had ever done before. Everybody knew. So we were in this council house in quite a nice area, to be honest. And we were scum, and as regards to everybody else, they thought we were.
Was you aware of that?
Yeah, God, yeah. People wouldn't let us play with their kids. So, and I was, I'd read a lot, I'd draw a lot. I was very kind of, very, I mean, that's kind of how you not to be like or Matilda about it, but that's what you do to get yourself out of the situations. You go and hide and read. And again, then I found sport, and that was fun. I was bigger. I could always
not to be too Matilda about it.
I love that.
What's that?
Not to be too Matilda about it. I love that.
Yeah. But it's the truth. So I knew it wasn't okay, and nobody at school spoke to us, and I don't feel like we had the support. If we were brought up today with, and anybody who had a clue, we'd have been in care. And we should have been in care. That's the fact of the matter. Like, there were 5 of us, and my mum wanted to keep us together. And you can look at that and you can resent that fact, or you can appreciate that fact. But I knew straight away that it wasn't okay. So this lady came to the door anyway, to see how my mum was. My dad ended up finding out about it, and it was just worse for everybody as a result. And as I say, I was actually the one to call the police eventually. I mean, the police came every single week. So we had the police at the house every single week. They knew us all by name. Like, once I got arrested with my brothers, And I genuinely, everybody says, "Oh, I didn't do anything wrong." I'm there getting arrested. I'm only getting arrested because I'm part of the family, because I'm big, and there was a whole harassment thing that my dad and brothers were kind of perpetuating, I guess. And yeah, we ended up getting evicted for that, and moved on. But so for me, I look at these situations and I don't say these things because, again, people have it worse. And that's what I always tell myself. I'd be like, "Rich, it's all right. Somebody's got it worse out there. So, basically, don't worry about it."
Is that what you were telling yourself at such a
Oh,
young
God, yeah.
age? You were already living by that?
100%. Like, never cry. Somebody's got it worse. Definitely. Even when Wayne died, my uncle, I didn't cry. I didn't want to. So I was like, because I've always had a thing, and I'm further than this now. So I appreciate, for a mental health podcast, some of this advice is not good advice, but I used to have a thing. It was, you got steps 1, 2, 3. Step 1 is where you were. Step 2 is what's happening now. Step 3 is where you want to be. So step 1 is where you were. Well, you're not there anymore because step 2 is happening. Step 2 is that shit thing. Well, what's the point in, and again, remember, this is me before, what's the point in kind of worrying about or focusing on or concentrating on step 2 when you want to get to step 3 anyway, and you're going to get there anyway. So step 3 is like the aftermath of whatever bad thing is happening or has happened. And again, this is not good advice, so please, nobody listening, take but it helped me at the time. I was like, there's no use in upset. There's no point. When people are like, the whole, "I'll give you something to cry about" sort of situation. It's like, well, I'm not giving you the satisfaction. I'm not. And then yeah, when and there's the sad fact is, there's been, it continues, because what ends up happening is, and I won't speak to names or or positions in the family, I guess, but suicidal attempts are still part of it. Basically, you don't come through that sort of thing and not have it impact you massively. Like all of us are massively impacted. I've chosen to be positive and optimistic, and it is a choice. When people say you wake up every day and you can choose whether to be happy or unhappy, and everybody says, "Fuck you, Rich, you're talking shit." I'm like, you can, to an extent. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying you can wake up and say, "That was pretty shit day like yesterday, wasn't it? What can I do about it?" And I do allow myself to feel those feelings now. So I do go through step 2 a bit, because I believe that, my 30s now, you recognize, oh, okay, well, maybe there are aspects of my personality that are so colored by not going through step 2 that I don't allow myself to, all I'm doing is striving. And that's all I've ever done. I was so desperate to succeed at such a young age. I like,
what was that to get out of the situation you was in?
100%. I mean, I ended up having my first daughter when I was 18. So I moved out straight away. My brother had moved out when he was 15. He's in some very council place, claimed homelessness, and was then moving, moved out. And then, so say, a few years later, bless him, he ended up inside. And so I think, I've had my photo taken in prison more time than I've had school photos. Do you know what I mean? Good. I watched, what do you call it? Time the other day. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Oh, I'm watching it now. Yeah.
Now. Oh, what's her name? The Jodie Whittaker.
Jodie Whittaker.
Oh my Lord, isn't she great? She is, for me, she is our, we got Stephen Graham, we got Jodie Whittaker, these fucking incredible British actors. So, people that we should really be, really be proud of. But I'm watching that, and you see, it didn't bother me until the moment where they're in there, and that the lad doesn't want to be there. I don't know. I don't want to ruin it for you guys.
I was just going to say, I'm only on the first episode. Don't spoiler alert.
She's in prison, right? So they have visitation anyway, and the kids are scared because they've just had to go through being sniffed by the dog, all the dogs, and it never struck me I knew it wasn't normal, but it never, when you look back, you're like, that's so far from normal for most people. That's so far. And as I say, my dad, I think I was the first first male in my family not to go inside for like 3 or 4 generations. Like,
gosh,
like my dad's dad, his uncle, my uncle, dad, like my older brother. And we've been fortunate, and I've been desperate to help everybody ever since, just make sure that that's not the path that everybody goes down. So, as I say, my attitude to mental health, why I say complex, is because I massively believe in the support that people need. I believe in the Samaritans and support they give to people. I believe in the therapy to an extent. And when I say to an extent, because I don't think it should be personally, and again, people are very, very welcome to disagree with this, but I think, perpetual, endless therapy every week where you cut yourself open and walk away unsewed up doesn't necessarily, talking therapy is wonderful for a fact, for a point, for something in relation to your life. And again, I've put my family through therapy. You know, I'll pay whatever it costs to support them as best as I can. But the second that you recognise that control lies within your own grasp, that's when I believe mental health can be, you know, can kind of be, your mental health can get better, because that's where, when I say complex, I just think people are so quick to say, well, it's not my fault, it's this.
But when you're talking about trauma, which is an entirely different animal, which you have experienced in abundance,
and I recognise that now, and I
hell of
didn't.
a lot more than pure like PMA to get through that.
It is and it isn't.
Sustainably, anyway.
Isn't like, and I recognise that, you know, I probably, you know, the adverse childhood experiences, so the ACEs, so there are 10 of them, right? I think I tick 7 or 8, and
I was going to say you probably tick a lot of them, yeah.
What's this? I don't know what this is.
Adverse childhood experiences. Sorry, Kirsty, you're the expert.
No,
here.
no, you crack on. No, go for it. I'll drink my tea.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's things like, are your parents split? Have you had a family member go to prison? Has there been drugs in the family? Has there been alcohol in the family? Has there been physical violence? You know, has there been sexual assault? You know, fortunately, I can, you know, I don't point to that one, but you know, so there are lots of, there are all these things that contribute to, you know, the other. I think another one is, you know, have you had to financially contribute to the household? You know, these sort of things. So, you know, I take 7 or 8. And I remember reading, I think if you have 4 or more, you are 8 times more likely to be an alcoholic and 4 times more likely to kill yourself. I think those are the stats, you know, bear with. So I completely accept and understand that trauma is an incredible,
Life-limiting,
difficult and life-changing thing to come through. I don't think what most people on a day-to-day basis experience is trauma. And that's not me saying, you know, again, woe is me, not you. That's me saying, you've had a shit day. You know, anxiety is not nervousness. Nervousness is not anxiety. If you get, you know, before you do something you really care about, you should feel anxious. Like, and I worry sometimes people conflate the two things. And again, the whole, you know, imposter syndrome thing. It's like, is it because were I to jump on Twitter, where I'm very active, I've got a good follow. I was very active, certainly. I've got a big following in and around the PR industry, where everybody talks about imposter syndrome. If I was to say, hey guys, I actually think I should be in that room, am I a prick? The people look at me and say, fuck you, Rich. Like, you know, oh, what? You're so brilliant. You're so great. Well done, you. And it's like, well, no, but also then if I don't agree with it and I don't put my arm around you and pat you on the back and say, well done for doing that relatively basic thing, and basic in the sense of, you know, oh, I made a phone call today, I'm really proud of myself, I had imposter syndrome beforehand. And I appreciate, again, everything's difficult for different people. And remember that I did preface all of this with, not everybody's going to love my approach to this. So please don't judge me too harshly. But I do think that we are so quick to put our arms around people. And I think that what it does is it means a lower tolerance for and a lower resilience basis. Like, I think that we are less likely to progress. And fundamentally, because my mindset was always progress, get up and out, up and out. Honestly, the words I tell myself, people have it worse, and get up and out. And I have broken that cycle. And of course, I'm still tethered to it and always will be. But, you know, because I care about my family very much, I want them to be happy. But the second they recognize that everything is within their control, that, you know, that life isn't happening at them, it's happening, you know, it's not, you know, they have a basis of, and if they don't, then I always talk about the 4, and I'm sure I've stolen this from somewhere, but the 4 kind of chair legs. And Kirsty, I'm sure you've probably heard this sort of thing before, where I think of, you know, are you looking after your body? Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Are you putting in a good day's work? Do you feel proud of the work that you're doing and the direction that you're going in? And that could be, you know, like professionally, career-wise, hobbies, whatever it is. Are you loving and being loved? And, you know, to love is an effort. You have to make sure that, you know, we all know what it's like when you don't put an effort with friends. So, you know, it's not just friends and family. Are you loving and being loved? And are you giving back? In what way are you supporting the communities around you? I'm not saying just chuck 10 quid in a, you know, in a charity drive. I'm saying the people around you, both your family, sure, but also the communities. So, you know, I support as many people as I can from, you know, from around where I'm from, because that's the impact I can have, you know. And I think if we all cared about community on a more local basis, then politics becomes easier, because we're supporting people. You support your neighbor, not necessarily, and it's not that I don't care about that person 5,000 miles away, but, you know, it's all about ripples. If I have that one and set that first and second ripple impact, then I can hopefully, then, you know, then, and they do the same thing. Then all of a sudden, all those ripples amount to the whole thing anyway. So there are the 4 chair legs. If you don't have one of those, and certainly if you don't have 2 of those, if you don't have one of those, the chair's creaky. So if you're not looking after your body, if you're not, you know, putting in, you know, if you're not working hard towards achieving something, if you're not loving and being loved, and if you're not giving back to the community in whatever way you can do, and that could mean just taking a cup of coffee around, or, you know, going and sitting with a neighbor, you know, it doesn't, or, you know, saying good morning to that person every day you see that you think maybe on the only conversation they have that day. It doesn't need to be given £1 million. It could be, you know, just.
But it's more about that connection, isn't it? Which again is it's so important.
Remember, I once heard the existing dialectic, and I can't remember who said it, but effectively what I took from that is, you know, the whole no man is an island. You know, what's the surest way to ensure insanity? Stick somebody in a bloody padded room. That's the quickest and shortest way to ensure it, because we as human beings need each other. So to your point there about community, that's it. And I think but what do I do when I'm most stressed? I don't train.
So I isolate myself. I eat shit. Yeah.
Eat shit. I don't train. I'll drink too much, definitely. And then, you know, there's no excuses, but, you know, I look back at the ACEs and I look back at the propensity for people who've come through that kind of trauma to drink. And I think, and it's not an excuse, but I go, okay, well, I can at least understand it. So when I'm stressed or not in a good place, I don't look after my body. I maybe don't work as hard as I could or should, or certainly I'm not as direct and you know, not
as productive. Yeah.
You know, am I the best for my family and friends around me? You know, would I sooner hide or pick up the phone, or, you know, do something loving with or for my girlfriend, or, you know, for my kids? You know, probably not, right? You know, you're not in the best place. That's the thing that drops. And if you're not in a good place, then, you know, are you supporting the people around you? So I know what it's like. You know, again, it's like, happiness isn't a straight line, is it? And, you know, I think more about joy. But, you know, when think, okay, I'm not in a great place, 1, 2, 3, or sometimes 4 of those things might fall over. My chair's fucked. It's fallen over. I've got to build that back up again. So my approach to mental health isn't, as I say, super popular, but it is one of, you know, recognize that we do exist in a community, in a society, and that if every single one of us put up our hand and self-diagnosed with insert thing here, you know, it's not going to be super popular, but the whole self-diagnosis of ADHD and autism. Well, my brother below me has Asperger's. And again, we're all on the spectrum, right? I get that. But for people that just say, oh yeah, I need the volume to be on a 5 or a 10. I'm sorry, but is that the same as a kid that literally can't function? You know, and again, you know, and should you be afforded the same support in an education setting as he might have needed, just because, you know, it seems almost trendy to point to, you know, a supposed, or, you know, a self-diagnosis. We're all struggling. Life's hard enough as it is. I don't know why we have to make it harder by, you know, chucking labels on ourselves. So yeah, sorry, that's a rambly way of saying. That's kind of my approach to this.
I'm really intrigued how you broke the cycle, Rich, because, and I want to sort of take you back to maybe sort of 15, 16 of like getting to the point where you're going to leave school. And I'm imagining at this point you're still from that family. And,
oh, yes.
And I mean that with the greatest respect. And how do you find opportunity when the area that you're in isn't going to give you a fair crack at the whip?
So it's a funny one. When I was at primary school, year 6, and there are also aspects to this that I couldn't say on the podcast because it impacts people too much. But you know, there are other huge, probably the biggest thing that I think drives me is something I can't really touch on, sadly. But at about that age, I realized, or I found out from my friend at school, he was going off to a grammar school, and I didn't know what the hell that was. I was like, right, you know, why are you going to this school? And he said, oh, you got to take a test to get in. You know, I already touched on the fact that I used to love reading, writing. Literature was one of my first loves. I once got suspended from primary school because I wouldn't take my earrings out. I got these big Brian Harvey hoot sleeper Right, just like not big, not like Pat Butcher, but like Brian Harvey Sleepers, my head shaved like him. I fucking love the guy. And then he turned out to be, not the best role model, bless him, but again, he's got his own, his own demons, right?
His own demons, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I tried to get him on my podcast, and his girlfriend was just like, "Do you know what? Brian doesn't do podcasts." This was actually recently. Do you remember when he came out against, came out again against the phone hacking?
Yeah,
because I know he. But I remember I was suspended once, and this is no word of a lie, and I didn't set this up. The paper came around. A journalist from the newspaper came around. I don't know why, because I guess we lived in a place called Slimbridge, where there was a Gazette, like this tiny little paper. They came around, and I was reading like H.G. Wells or something. And the journalist wrote about it in the piece, and it made me sound like this really precocious prick. But also I've always had a bit of that cheeky, but a bit of that, I love knowledge. I'm curious about everything. I want to find out if something. I'm not like mechanically minded, but if something, if I don't know why something works or how it works. I mean, Stu, how many questions have I asked you already about podcasting? It's like I just want to be. If I can do something, I want to be the best at it. Like, I'm jumping ahead, but I wrote a non-fiction book, a PR book. I was asked to. A publisher came to me because I had a bit of an audience. Became the best-selling book in PR, but that wasn't by accident. And PR's a small, obviously not a cottage industry. It impacts all of us, but I was desperate for that to be the case. My blog was the #1 blog in the in the country, the PR blog. I was named the most influential person on Twitter and PR. None of this is by accident. It's because my approach, I guess, comes from what I'm saying. My friend, he said about this grammar school, and I'm very aware how self-congratulatory all of this sounds, and I'll kick myself afterwards and think you're a knobhead. And it's not.
So.
But he said he was going to this school. I asked my headmistress if it was too late for me to take the test, and it was. And I was like, "Is there nothing we can do?" So she got in touch, because the test had already gone. I think
it's 11 plus.
11 plus, yeah. So I took it. And I ended up passing. I later found out, and I don't know how true this is, when a teacher in my secondary school was really pissed off at me. He said that he couldn't believe that I got the best score in the year. Now, I don't know how true that is. He could have just been like, he's my rugby coach, and he was prone to shouting at me, which is fine. I deserve to be shouted at sometimes. But yeah, so I ended up getting in, and that was when I think social mobility was real. And I don't believe in it quite as much now. I don't think social mobility in and out of grammar schools is real. I think they're a great thing. I think they helped me massively. Again, I was only there, I think my most years I was 60% of the time was my attendance. But I was fortunate in that I had a base of knowledge, I guess, that drove me. But I've always been the case that if I want to be good at something, I will put the work in. I'll be as good as I can be. Again, very well how conceited that sounds. But what I mean by that is my older brother, who, bless him, is, he's obviously, he's the one that I mentioned who's been inside, went in quite a young age. He's out. He's had his own difficulties. Because when your dad takes you to do coke when you're 12, 13, and that'll do it. Just life's violent. It was violent, and all three of my brothers are bouncers. And you got a sister as well. She's not a bouncer, but she probably bloody could be. I'm the smallest. You know what I mean? I'm a big guy, and I'm like probably the smallest of all of us. Yeah. So they're for me that kind of. Rob, my older brother, said to me, we were sat once, and he was possibly in a more upset mood, and he was like, I think he's got this perception that I'm just lucky, and I don't believe in luck, but I do believe in good fortune. I believe it's fortunate, Stu, that like we met each other. I think I look at, and I think it's positivity. Chuck it out there, and it'll come back at you. Not in a karmic way necessarily, but just in a.
I say, do you believe in the whole laws of attraction thing? Are you an advocate?
I believe in doing good for other people, and and if you do that, you feel good about yourself, and it does. People are attracted to people that try, that look after them, that care about them. Again, we exist in a society. If I because I want to know more about why you live in a boat. I want to know, I want to know all of that, because at some point, you never know when these things come back around. Do you know what I mean? And that's a curiosity in me. I care about people, and I care about people being happy, and I think, or certainly not being unhappy. But he said to me, yeah. So how do you? Because it does, from the outside looking in, I appreciate it. It looks like I don't fail, like I succeed at things. Business has been successful. The last couple of years have been bloody hard. But, we've worked with some of the biggest brands, biggest people. Stu mentioned the client earlier on. That's Conor McGregor. That doesn't just happen. Like you've got to work hard and be trusted. And that came through some work that I've done from Paddy Power and a great contact I've made there and a great friend that I've made there. So then I got asked to go out to Dublin and we're working with him for his brand. And these things happen because I think sociability and kind of that social intelligence are just as equal to academic intelligence, possibly even more. Certainly in my view.
How do you deal now when things don't work out?
I just think, what am I not doing right? I've always had a thing, if I'm not getting what I want, I'm not saying the right words in the right order to the right people. And that's, again,
ultimately everything is under your control.
Yes. And that sounds really grabby and like, but it's not about that. It's like, okay, they all say if you're the brightest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, don't they? But am I speaking to the right people? Am I doing this for the right reasons? I think one of the reasons the podcast has been as successful as it has been already, and hopefully will continue to be, there's such authenticity there. Like, I care a fucking great deal about both the people I speak to and their stories. And if something doesn't go right for me, I think, okay, well, it wasn't meant to be. Again, that sounds a tiny bit too, woolly for how I mean it.
Yeah.
What I mean is, if it's not working out, then it's on me, and that's like so. You
take full responsibility for the good and the bad that comes your way. It can never just be, do you know what? I tried my best. I did everything that I could. There's nothing. Looking back, there's nothing I would have done differently. It just didn't work out. You're always like, no, let's change it. Strategy.
Well, if I have failed in any way, and I definitely have, I've started businesses that haven't worked out. I made wrong decisions during the pandemic, and after so I'm sat in my office now. We got to 20 something people, 25 people in the company. Not huge, but in PR terms, it's decent. And I held on to people in the face of the worst market I think we've seen, certainly since I got into PR, which was in 2008. I was a personal trainer before that, so I did that for a couple of years. The recession kind of put paid to that. I had my daughter Maya when I was 18, dropped out of school, had her. So then I was like, okay, well, I need a good job. And then I just became became obsessed with PR and the industry. And I think that's the thing that binds everybody else I speak to as well for the podcast, is that there's like a real curiosity, obsession, and perseverance, like resilience. And super successful people. Sorry, Stu, I know I jumped out, but
if you had to pinpoint something that you feel defines you, what would that be?
Yeah. Probably control. Yeah. Or can I be slightly more positive about it and say optimism? Like, I'm optimistic. If I've failed, and again I have, then I think, what decision did I or didn't I make? So again, in the face of the worst market we've experienced in PR, I just kept spending. Because I was like, I've got these people that rely on me, and I'm very, very aware through my family and again community that I have around me. I'm very, very aware of the support that I have always been able to give. So then when I've got these employees that we're in the worst time and we're unprofitable, we're losing money. I paid myself very, very little for years to stack it as high as I possibly could. I spent hundreds of thousands of pounds keeping people in employment without that money coming back in. And I think they'd be surprised, they'll never listen to this, but if they ever did, they'd go, oh, okay, I recognize them, why you let us go when you did, because I couldn't keep doing it in a market that was as tough as it was. And I look around and I see agencies folding, and it's been rough the last 2-3 years, genuinely. I think PR, advertising, marketing, it's the first thing that goes. You're a brand and you need to tighten your belt. Well, we've got the product that's getting out the door. We've got to manufacture it. We've got logistics. We've got, we've got sales, all those things. Well, let's put let's stop on PR, marketing, advertising for the moment until we work out where we are. So what that does, it left us in a position where I had a load of people that I wanted to look after, and obviously furlough's gone. That's not a thing anymore. to the point where I've got an employee, or had an employee, he was 17, 18 weeks pregnant. And just so I could look myself in the mirror, you need to be 25 weeks in your 25th week of pregnancy at a company to get maternity leave. But I had to let people go. So I let her go, but still paid her from 17, 18 weeks to 25. So she was still an employee. And I'm still this second paying her maternity pay now, and will do for another couple of months. And then, I mean, I got a bit upset after that fact, actually, because then I saw a week or two later, she tagged in Pregnant and Screwed on LinkedIn and said about how, searching for a job while you're pregnant is so difficult. I'm still paying her at this point, bear in mind. And then she found a company and was like, I'm so glad that they, found a company that care a lot about pregnant people. And I'm like, I mean, this is the first time I've ever said anything outside of my relationship with my girlfriend, to the upset of that, because I think actually optimistic, yes, but generous, over generous to a point, because I know what it's like not to have anything and not to feel supported. So I think there's, So when I fail, I think, so I look back at that and I think I failed, but I didn't fail for any, I failed in that moment because those people have all gone on to good jobs. I've supported them as best as I can into good jobs, but I failed myself. I failed the company. I failed those people by basically what? By imagining I'm this Fagin character, this person that needs to support them through, through all sorts of ups and downs. No, they're adults. They'll be okay. And I think, but again, that was within my control.
Would it be a fair assumption to make when it comes to your own mental health and thinking about whenever there's been a decline or when your mental health has been anything but at its optimum level? Would it be a fair assumption to make that it's when it impacts on other people, when your actions have impacted on other people, that's when your mental health, if ever it has, would take a dip? Because obviously you sound like the most optimistic person I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to.
Okay.
But again, 100%. But again, you take responsibility for absolutely everything. You refuse to kind of relinquish control or the results of consequences being out of your control. So is that a fair assessment to make?
So can you say it again? Because I think that the answer is yes, but let me just be sure that I'm saying yes to the right thing.
Have you ever experienced poor mental health for reasons other than when your actions have impacted detrimentally to someone else?
No, it almost always relates to how I impact on other people. Yeah. And if I've made just to speak very candidly now, my eldest daughter and I butt heads hugely. She's 17 now. Butt heads hugely because my approach to mental health doesn't chime with hers, and I recognise that. And even
that's
then,
the same as me and my dad. To be fair, it's yeah.
But my approach to that is that I look at social media and I think we're not equipped, we're not evolved enough to be one of 7-8 billion people and look endlessly at the successes, the wins of other people. That person's funnier, better looking, richer. Insert more popular, insert thing here. Especially as a teenager, and not be fucking dramatically impacted by that. I don't think we're not. I know we're not. Because Stuart will do it. Where Kirsty, hopefully, or not necessarily like this, but where I'll be looking at the charts all the time. Again, when I had the book, it's at the book out, to the point where people are like, yeah, we get it, you've got a book out, and I'm like, yeah, but I'll endlessly be, comparison is the thief of joy. We all know that, but I will endlessly, go out of my way to, okay, well, what are they doing that I'm not? Because again, it's a control thing. It's in my control. If I'm not succeeding, I can't just leave it to chance. I can't just leave it to, it might work out for me, it might not. I don't have a same. I'm fortunate now to have financial security and the safety net of that, but I don't have the security of, podcasting. I'm a nobody. I'm coming into this. I'm a knobhead from Gloucester, and that's how I always look at life. Is I'm a knobhead from a shit start in Gloucester. So
that's the name of his podcast, by the way, Kirsty.
So I think there are ways that I've been fortunate. There, we can talk race, we can talk other things. there are certainly ways that I've been fortunate, but then arguably ways that I've not been. But then I just think, how do I? So you'll notice with me, I go off on little. It's because I don't think about it enough. I don't externalize it enough, which is why it's really.
Have you had therapy yourself?
I have, and
How did
it
you
was
find
great.
that?
It was fine. Do you know what is useful to do is to contextualize and think, okay, well, know that poor little, like, because one of the most powerful things that the therapist said was, picture yourself at the earliest age that you can imagine remembering, or that you can remember feeling. What you felt about, what I've said, about, other people have it worse and I need to get up and out. I need to break this cycle. Picture look at that little boy and tell me that's okay. And that's a pretty upsetting thought, because I, again, have 3 children. I've got one on the way.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. So I've got 17, 12, 6, and one on the way, because I don't do things by halves. And the complexity of that being a relationship post the relationship with the mother of the children, all those things. But I look at that and I think, well, no, of course that's not okay. But then I recognise that my parents, flawed as they are and were, and did the best they could, because I recognise my father's life was not, it was incredibly violent, abusive, and I mean, it was rough. But the worst thing is then to visit that upon your children, is then to recognize how fucking horrible that is, and then to be the person that then brings that to future generations. I can't fathom it. I can't get my head around it, and I never will. So therapy was useful in allowing me to see, no, that's not okay, which I already knew, but go, right, well, where are my levers here? And it's forgiveness. That's a wonderful one, because if you can forgive those people that have kind of had that impact on you, then it allows you to move forward, I think. But also, I do believe that, were I still doing it now, I don't think it would be useful to me. I think what it does is it cuts you open, it doesn't sew you back up. Because your talking therapy is one where somebody is paid very well, usually, and I don't say this just like therapists, to allow you to express yourself, because most people, especially men, rarely externalize to a degree where we're able to really assess our upbringing and the things that have happened to and around us. I think it's useful to a point. I would sooner, and I've said this recently, my positivity, I know I'm well mentally when I'm positive, and when I'm positive is because I'm doing something, and that might be devil makes work for idle thumbs and it's essentially me just trying to strive from thing to thing. And by the way, it never fills you up, and Stuart, I know you've spoken to a million, in fact, even on this, you had Gail Porter on, you've had people like that who've experienced incredible success. You're not filled up by that succce. I've never
does it give you joy?
Not really. For a minute, for a second, not really. Any success, like whether financial milestones that everybody thinks, oh, when you hit this, then this, you hit that milestone. It's like, again, the only thing I ever cared about was financial security. So we'd have debt collectors coming around taking our shit. We would have my mum, bless her, because of where we lived, possibly also, and there are 5 of us. She would do, those Christmas catalogs, like not
parks and
parks, all those, fucking Christ, that brings back memories.
Other Christmas catalogs are available.
They are. But where she'd get into a ton of debt for Christmas to make us feel, because Christmas, any occasion, you ask anybody from from a violent upbringing, and a poorer one as well. Ask anybody, like, family occasions are the worst, because this is like chicken coop. You are that's the situation. So she wanted to make it nice, and also, again, went to quite a nice school where we were the outcast family, definitely. Like, my dad was known for pulling people out of cars and beating them up, and quite violent drugs and all those things. So where other people were relatively well to do, so my mum would spend a fortune on shit we didn't need, and then 6 weeks later, 2 months later, guess what? That stuff's getting taken. So financial security for me, and sitting in the dark, because you're there pressing it. Most people understand this, but you used to have, so the electric used to be a token. So you go to the shop, MEB,
put it on your key, electric key.
10 quid on the key, 10 quid on the key or the card. You put it in, it lasts for as long as it lasts. But then when that's gone, you get this golden, wonderful, magic
Emergency.
thing called, emergency, right? You press emergency, and you don't know how long that's going to last. It's like, right. And then all of a sudden, the light goes and you're sat in the dark. And I used to hate the fact that money was a conversation every day, and it was just a conversation. It was a point of upset and aggression. It was a point of nothing works because you don't provide anything to the household. My mum might say to my dad, you're drinking or whatever, and then he's like, he doesn't. She's, I don't want to say it necessarily, but not always being 100% honest with benefits. And I'm going in and buying things with milk tokens, and it's embarrassing. Being the kid, being the poor kid is fucking embarrassing. So,
where did you get your self-worth from, there, Rich?
Where now or where did then? Sounds sick.
He's like a therapist, him, isn't he? Crikey, he's been working with me too long.
Right, he's really good. So self-worth then was achievement and success. And so throughout being a teenager, I played rugby, and I played like representative rugby. I put myself forward for it, or I get put forward for it. And I remember once saying to my coach, I was like, I've never not got anything I've gone for. And he looked at me and he was like, Rich, that's quite a knobhead thing to say. And I didn't see it at the time, and now I do. But I'm like, my successes were, I like to be the person in the room that surprises you. I like to be the person that, I wanted to be the kid. And I think it was a lot about fuck you. A lot of my direction, a lot of my drive is anger. And even now it is, it doesn't go away. It was those people that wouldn't let me play with your kids. Fuck you. I guarantee I'm more successful than you. Fuck you. Like I will achieve in a way that you can't, because you don't have it. They talk about like Tyson in a ring, and it's like, don't get in a ring with Tyson because he wants it 100 times more than you do. And that was me with anything kind of remotely, and okay, to a very, very different degree, and we didn't go down that path. But me with anything was, I want to achieve, and you don't want it as much as me, I promise you. And that was my self-worth then, which I appreciate is a hollow sort of self-worth. It really is.
It's an understandable. It's very understandable.
Given that you've come from nothing.
Exactly.
You've had
nothing. And I think if you speak to lots of successful people, I do think anybody that has achieved success that has come from a lower or working class background, there will be a big part of that drive is fuck you. To those that have, to those that have had privileged upbringings and had that, to bring back to your podcast, the starting line is in a very different place to where other people's are. I just want to start to wrap it up now, but I want to sort of bring it up to speed now. You found yourself where you've achieved remarkable. It's remarkable what you've done, Rich.
Relative. I feel like I could achieve a ton more. I look at people all the time and think, again, comparisons to Thief of Joy, sure, but I think I've not done anything like I want to achieve.
But that's good. That's exciting. That you gives you a reason to get out of bed and start a good day, not a bad day, because you want to there's things that to pursue. With where you're at now, and you've achieved this financial security and this comfortable life with a loving family around you, I'm talking about your immediate family. How is that for you when you go and visit your extended family, your parents and your brothers now? And the dynamic is very it's very different. You're not all in the same boat anymore. And I don't.
No, we're not.
Try and understand where I'm coming from here. And how do they, view? I know you said one of your brothers or your dad thinks that you've had a lot of luck.
My brother thought. I don't think he necessarily believes that now. I think because we talked quite a lot about it, and we're from the same think place, man. Like, you know, it is, if not mindset, what is it? You know, yes, nature, nurture. You can arguably say that. And also, I mean, when I say nurture, there was an element. I did get fortunate in that I was good at a sport that takes you down the path of looking after your body. It takes you down the path of community and you know, the want to achieve and the want to succeed and the want to win, and you know, and if you're not winning, then to lose humbly and or to lose graciously even, you know. I think sports are incredible for that. So my family now are, as I say, relatively where they were 15 years ago, and that's not a slight on them. That's to say that it is the system of that. So breaking a cycle is rare. I recognize that now. Usually it just rolls and rolls, and people do, you know, treat others as they've been treated. I think they look at me as successful. I think I can't talk finance with them. I wouldn't, because there'd be no point in doing that, because, you know, like if I said about what our wage bill was, for instance, that's a life-changing amount of money for, you know, on a monthly basis for my family. I mean, I remember my mum once got an inheritance, blessed. I mean, she had a, Christ, when her mum passed away, my mum had a full-on breakdown, as in psychiatric, not okay breakdown. But she, it wasn't her mum actually, it was her, I mean, that was when that happened, but her granddad, her granddad passed away. She got some money. And what poor people do with money quite quickly is fritter it. And you make excuses for, oh, I'm going to spend it on this thing here, that thing there, that, you know, I'm going to buy you this that you need. And it just quickly goes. And I think, you know, what I learned about everything I've learned about money, I've learned by doing the opposite. And that is said with the greatest deal of love to my mum. I'm terrified of debt. You know, the idea of owing somebody. Sure, if you bought me a beer, I'm thinking about that for weeks.
Yeah.
If I've not given it you back.
It's like I'm looking in a mirror. This is, yeah.
Is that right? Where does yours, like, where's yours from?
Growing up being on benefits. Yeah, my mum, bless her, she didn't work. My mum's got poor mental health. She has done for as long as I can remember. And kind of similar to yourself, you know, being the poor kid at school, being the kid that's got the dinner ticket and that kind of thing. It's, yeah, obviously I haven't had nowhere near the experience that you have, but I can definitely relate to a lot of what you've said today.
Completely. Again, back to your point, like, you know, caught the way through. And I appreciate that. I'm not here saying that it's been, you know, it's been this horrific thing for me. And again, I'd listen to and appreciate and can completely understand, I'd hope, where you're coming from. And that's when I talk about authenticity and empathy and understanding, I think if we could all give each other that grace, all understand each other that bit better, and but at the same time saying, are you going to let that define you? Are you going to let that, you know, are you going to let that define you negatively or positively? And how long for? How long can you stay in bed? How long can you stay, and I use this word advisedly, but in that victimhood mentality of, I can't, you know, this has happened to me, so this is my lot. It's like, well,
this is all I'm capable of achieving, kind of thing.
It's not, you know, and again, you know, those 4 chair legs, if you know, they all mean something different to everybody. You know, looking after my body might mean I go for a walk every day, you know, or it might mean that you know, my macros are absolutely perfect, and you know, I'm training 5 times a week or whatever it is. You know, helping the community might be just, you know, offering to take somebody's dog for a walk that, you know, you recognize is struggling. Or, do you know what I mean? There's so many different things. Or it could mean, as I said, I've done a ton for charity. I was a trustee of a charity. I mean, somebody came to me, a friend of mine came to me, and because of PR is a skill in itself, helping to amplify voices, helping to amplify news is, I recognize, a skill in itself. Somebody came to me because their child, Olken, he was, Christ, how old was he at the time? You can Google News all this. He needed a transplant, and it was literally life or death transplant. So my friend came to me and he was like, they're at their wits' end. They can't find a match. They can't find a donor match. What do we do with this? So I did a whole big national drive, and he ended up getting 2 matches, and, you know, Olken's completely, yeah. But that there is because I'm like, well, what can I do? It's control. You know, that's so. I was to say, trustee of a charity. We raise more than £1 million for kids that need treatment that isn't available on the NHS, so operations or treatment. Because sadly, in this austere, government, we're in a position where it's not always the case that you can have like a lumbar treatment to help for a kid to be helped to walk. You'd think that sort of stuff would be obvious, and I forget the names of the treatments now, but like this sort of thing isn't always obvious. But I recognise I can help, so I should. So community and giving back means something different to everybody. For me, it's I get a lot of self-worth now out of generosity, but then also I recognise it's a real double-edged sword, because I don't need eternal gratitude. I certainly don't. But when I feel, and it happens so much because I think people are so wrapped up in their own lives, and there is a selfishness, a real selfishness to it. When you feel like you're getting like that maternity example, I feel like I'm doing so much to help a person at a difficult time. They'll never turn the mirror around and look at me. They'll go, "What? This is happening to me. This is bad for me." They don't recognise the efforts that you go to for them, and I allow it. A tinge of resentment can creep in. And I don't need anything, like I'll probably never speak to Olkan again, in his whole life. But I know that I've supported that family through one of the most difficult times you can go through. And why? Because I'd want that for me, that to be the case. And again, I look back and I think we weren't supported when we were young. We probably should have been in care, but my mum veiled it very, very well. I probably should be in prison, but that wasn't the way my mind worked. I was like, well, let me do something positive. Let me try to be positive and take people with me. So yeah, self-worth now is generosity, definitely giving possibly an awful lot of myself. But when all I need, when somebody's like, "Cheers, man," that's all I need. Do you know what I mean? It's just somebody to go, "I recognize you did that thing," and it fills me up. And that's probably some insecurity in me that is like, through rejection or not being wanted in some way, shape, or form. Like, just validate. I will do anything.
Worth, yeah,
which you don't have a lot of when you're, when you are brought up the way I was brought up. You're not taught self-worth. You're not taught sociability. You're not taught. And I recognise, Stu, that you were trying to wrap up, but just for one of my dad's mates, and my parents didn't have many friends. Again, my mum wasn't allowed friends. My dad would have got very, very fighty. But one of my dad's mates was a drug dealer who he'd been inside for manslaughter. And he used to play basketball with me sometimes. We'd go out into the back, and this big dude. But actually, when I went to my first gym, he trained there, and he kind of took me on his wing a tiny bit. But big dude. And I remember, so this is the kind of, the friendships that I recognize as friendships anyway. He came once. Where I grew up was quite white. He's this black guy, comes with 3 or 4 other black guys in a massive Range Rover to deliver us a dodgy PS2, like a dodgy PlayStation 2, right? And I'm like, okay, that's not normal, he's a lovely guy. I mean, Christ, I think at last count he had something like 10 children, something like that. This guy, I say he's a lovely guy. He did go to prison for manslaughter, which I very much feel.
But it was an accident. It was an accident.
That's what they say. But that's the situation. I mean, and another one time my dad came out of prison. He's back in within 24 hours because he went to smack some bloke up that he thought my mum was carrying on with. So these are the kind of, when this is, I guess, what you have grown up with. Self-worth is at your self-worth kind of tank is always at a low, and you've got to do. I personally felt like I've had to do everything to bring it up, and any external validation does nothing. It all has to come from me, and even still, then I remember saying recently, I was like, I'm never going to be happy. I'm never going to be like happy. I hopefully will be content and find joy in life, but I'm never going to be that person that. And it's not about money, because some of the happiest people I've ever met are just the people that do the same shit every day, and and you go to the corner shop and you see that person, they're like the happiest person in the world.
I'm so jealous of them. So jealous.
When sometimes, and even from this short call, I recognise, because you're probably the same person where you're like, if only I didn't have this fucking stupid brain. If only
I could shut this thing off.
which is why I think drink helps, right? That's the thing that, and I'm not saying it does. I'm not saying, but when you're at your most stressed, that's where people reach to it. That's where people reach for drugs.
Well, any kind of drug, isn't it, to smoothen the edge off, really, isn't it?
Anything that stops you from being inside your own head, having to. It's not about reliving. It's about having to try to make some semblance of sense, which is why positivity is all I've got. If I'm not moving forward, I don't know where I'm moving. Because if I'm stood still, then I'm moving backwards. It's kind of how I've always perceived it, which is why starting my podcast, speaking to successful people about who they are, why they are who they are. I think for me, it's a selfish act. I'm understanding them better, so I understand myself better. It's a bit of a love letter to my family, because I need them to see some of these people have been through, even if they're a James Cracknell and they started, what I would have perceived at the time to be miles and miles ahead of where I was, he still had to work bloody hard. He still had to take control. He still had his, push bike, his bicycle accident. Where he in 2010. It's the starting line resets for some people, even much like it did with him. So it's not about. I've said this plenty of times, and I hope it's understood. Is I'm not trying to find the person with the worst life in the world, where I go, we found him, we found this person over here. Look at him! Isn't his life horrid? That's not. And isn't he able to be positive? Isn't that wonderful? Because that's a relatively shallow way of looking at things. It's just trying to find successful people, trying to understand them. As I say, trying to see where there's parallels, where there's not. And again, if I could be quite so romantic about it, is that love letter to my family, where I'm like, please listen and just recognize that control is in your grasp, and that's media and my children. I'd love them to recognize that maybe the way their dad thinks and speaks isn't just because I'm some knobhead that thinks, anxiety isn't a thing. Of course it fucking is. Of course it is. I'm just saying there are ways to wake up and try to improve your situation. And not every, you might wake up for 3 months in a row and think, not today, but, recognize that there is a happier tomorrow, and that it doesn't have to end, as sadly it has done for lots of people in my life, or, for enough people, certainly, how many is enough, with making a decision to end your life. That's the sad fact is that's an option. It's always an option. And, that shouldn't be an option that I think that I've thankfully not been there since I was a child, with that mindset. And that was only once. And then you go, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? How do I impact enough people positively and actually make whatever this is worthwhile?
Lovely. Perfect.
Sorry, I'm back.
No, not at all. Not at all. Rich, we will put the links to the Starting Line podcast in the show notes, so listeners of this can go and enjoy the episodes. It's a wonderful podcast, and Rich, it's been really nice, and you've been really generous with telling your story today.
So candid and honest. Thank you.
And
as I said, there are aspects. I'll get off of this and I'll kick myself where I think I either shouldn't have said that, or there are reasons.
I do that on every single pod. Don't worry.
It's just there are fundamental things about me that I recognise have impacted me enormously, that I think there are too many people that it would impact were I to speak directly to them. But it's going, okay, well, as I said a second ago, like, what else are you going to do but be as positive as you can be? Because like I may as well, let's say, jump off something tall. Don't do that. But not while speaking on a mental health podcast. But what else am I going to do but be positive? I don't know where else to go if not there.
Absolutely. Rich Leigh, thank you so much. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.